The New York Times editorial page mounted an unusual crusade this week. Day after day, the paper argued, it is time to legalize marijuana.
I guess the point is we're not urging people to smoke pot any more than we are for them to drink alcohol or to smoke cigarettes. It's just that making it illegal was creating a social cost for the country that was absolutely unacceptable.
But the media didn't just fall into line. CBS interviewed a prominent opponent, while NBC's Today Show reported on a rise in homelessness in the first state to legalize weed, Colorado.
This summer in Colorado, there's a different type of Rocky Mountain high, a higher number of the homeless.
I knew a couple people who were like, yeah, I'm from Texas. I'm just here to smoke.
What brought me here is because I was able to just smoke pot freely.
Well, what the New York Times is calling for is a really radical move that counters all the major medical associations that have looked at this. And it wouldn't be good for America. Do we really want to encourage a stoned society?
Jonah Goldberg, is the New York Times out of touch on this marijuana crusade? Because polls do show that 54% of Americans in a couple of recent surveys favor legalization.
Yeah, look, I write for a magazine, National Review, that called for ending the drug war 20 years ago. Okay, so
including decriminalizing
pot. I'm a little more of an outlier.
So you're saying the Times is late to this?
Well, what I'm saying, in fact, is that the New York Times is pulling a Ferris Bueller, which is where you jump out in front of the parade and you act like you're leading it. Mm-hmm. This has been a fad and a fashionable thing in progressive circles and elite circles for years now in terms of decriminalizing pot. I mean, when Colorado, the District of Columbia, Washington State beat the New York Times to the position, you can't really say the New York Times is out in front of anything. Moreover, the hypocrisy of the New York Times invoking states' rights, something I care about a great deal.
Just explain, saying that once we repeal the federal law, each state can decide on its own, like Colorado, right. Washington,
which I think is fantastic.
To repeal and not repeal. You like that?
Very much. I would push almost all these things down to the lowest level possible. But the New York Times doesn't have that position on tobacco. It doesn't have that position on anything else except the policies where it think it will advance the ball.
Doesn't have that position on health care. Doesn't have the position on same-sex marriage. Rick Kelly, as we saw a little bit in those clips, the rest of the media not falling into line with glowingly positive reports about let's go ahead and legalize pot.
Well, it was interesting because Gawker, which can be awfully snarky sometimes, I thought they actually had a really interesting column by Hamilton Nolan, which was titled "Endorsing Legalized Weed Doesn't Make You a Thought Leader," which sounds, again, like a snarky Gawker type title. But when you read it, he essentially made the same argument, which is when you have the New York Times doing article after article for years on the inherent inequity racially in terms of arrest and who was facing larger penalties for marijuana arrests in New York, and then to wait all of this time once it sort of becomes popular in polls nationally to say, well, here we are being thought leaders on the issue. You can't really claim that mantle if you know.
That's 2 votes for the Times being too slow. But look, this is a serious effort with multiple editorials, TV appearances, a Facebook chat. Is this issue worth it?
I think that they could have spent a lot of that ink on something that is more important to the American public. How about the economy and creating jobs? How about the VA scandal? Where did that go? That's fallen off the face of the print media. It just seems to me like this social issue does advance the cause of the Upper West Side editors who happen to run the paper and not of the people across America.
Well, I've described it as the revenge of the baby boomers who grew up smoking a fair amount of pot.
If it feels good, do it.
Yeah,
right?
But the New York Times getting behind this issue, is that having an impact in and of itself?
Oh, I think it's stirring the pot.
So to speak.
I know, no pun. Well, actually, the pun was intended. But it is getting people to talk about it. We're talking about it here. You and I talked about it on Bill O'Reilly's show. People are concerned about it in these sort of media circles. But my point still
media
goes
circles
back
means that it's even if the paper is late and it's not a thought leader, it is now driving this conversation, and that's part of what an editorial page is supposed to do, is spur debate.
I think they're surprised, though, at how little it's actually driven the conversation. I mean, I think that 10 years ago, this would have really been a major news story. As we've all discussed, it's not. I mean, what happens is I think the New York Times has been caught a little bit off guard by how much social media actually drives conversations in a way editorial pages no longer do in print publications.
I think that's exactly right, and I think also because this marijuana legalization is a fad and all the stuff I said already, but there's another issue. The New York Times editorial page, not the op-ed page, they got some good columnists and some terrible ones, but the editorial page is awful. It is they write terrible editorials.
What does this have to do with?
Well, no, that's my point, is that they've lost their credibility. Look, the Washington Post has interesting editorials. The Wall Street Journal, lots of newspapers do. The New York Times is the most boring, uninteresting, go with the fad kind of liberal elitist publication.
Well, let me guess, you don't write for the New York Times, do you?
Nor do I have any intention to try. So I can be honest. Kind of like some other people who may want
I thought you were going to say they're drinking too much alcohol, but
no, they're just bad.
Well, I'll leave that to your opinion, but I will also say that I do think the Times has influenced the debate here. Jonah Goldberg, Kelly Goff, thanks very much for joining us.